I'm Catherine, 42 female. I live alone in a quiet suburban town, in a small house I bought myself with years of careful saving and hard work. As a senior project manager for a large tech firm, my life is a series of deadlines, budgets, and meticulous plans, a reality that has always suited my personality. For the last 5 years, that same meticulous planning has been directed toward one person, my mother, Margaret. The peace I'd carefully curated in my life was about to be obliterated by a single lie. A lie so cruel it would force me to use my professional skills for a deeply personal and painful project. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Responsibility was a lesson I learned early. My father passed away when I was 16, leaving my mother, Margaret, to raise me and my younger brother, Ethan. I was the serious one, the planner. While Ethan, 5 years my junior, was charming his way through life, I was the one making sure the bills were paid on time and that Mom had one less thing to worry about. It wasn't a burden I resented, it was just who I was. I loved my family, and this was how I showed it. As we grew up, these roles became cemented. I went into the corporate world, climbing the ladder with steady determination. Ethan became an entrepreneur, a vague title that seemed to involve a lot of exciting ideas and very little stable income. He was the golden child, the one Mom bragged about to her friends, while I was the reliable, predictable daughter. The Rock. 5 years ago, Mom's health took a sharp decline. After a bad fall and a series of smaller incidents, it became clear she could no longer live safely on her own. The decision to move her into a nursing home was agonizing, but necessary. We toured several facilities, and I was the one who scrutinized the care plans, the staff-to-resident ratios, and the safety protocols. Ethan showed up for one tour, made a few jokes with the staff, told Mom how lovely the garden was, and then left for a critical investor meeting. The choice fell to me, and I picked the best one we could find, Oakwood Meadows. It was clean, highly recommended, and had a wonderful, compassionate staff. It was also expensive. When the time came to discuss finances, Ethan's entrepreneurial ventures were, as usual, in a critical growth phase. He gave a polished presentation over dinner about seed funding, future IPOs, and how he couldn't possibly liquidate his assets. "Just give me a year or two, Kath," he'd said, flashing that winning smile. "Once my startup takes off, I'll pay you back double." I knew better than to hold my breath, so I did what I always did. I took on the responsibility. The monthly bill for Oakwood Meadows was just over $7,000. It took a significant portion of my salary, but I made it work. I cut back on vacations, drove my 10-year-old car, and put my own retirement savings on a slower track. It was for Mom. It was the right thing to do. My brother's contribution was non-financial. He was the entertainer. He promised to visit Mom constantly to keep her spirits up. "You handle the money, I'll handle the morale," he declared, as if it were an equal division of labor. For the first few months, he seemed to stick to it. He'd send me selfies with Mom, both of them beaming. But slowly, the pictures stopped. His excuses started. A business trip, a developer crisis, a crucial networking event. Soon, his visits dwindled to major holidays, and even then, they were brief. I, on the other hand, built my life around Mom. I lived 40 minutes away from Oakwood Meadows, and I made the drive 3 to 4 times a week. I'd go on my lunch breaks, after work, and every single Sunday. We'd watch her favorite old movies, I'd read to her, and we'd just talk. I learned the names of all her nurses and aides. I brought them coffee and donuts as a thank you. I attended every care plan meeting with her social worker and doctor. I was not just her daughter. I was her advocate, her primary caregiver, and the person who knew her medication schedule better than she did. It was exhausting, but it was my routine. It was my duty. I never once complained to Ethan about the cost or the time. I never asked him for a penny. I simply shouldered the load, believing that I was ensuring our mother had the best care possible in her final years. I thought my actions spoke for themselves. I had no idea that behind my back, a completely different story was being told, and my devotion was being reframed as abandonment. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was in the middle of a tense conference call, trying to mediate a dispute between two departments on a multi-million-dollar project. My phone buzzed on the desk, screen down. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Finally, during a lull, I glanced at the screen. It was my Aunt Susan, my mother's older sister. I shot her a quick text, "In a meeting, can I call you back?" Her reply was instant and chilling. "No, call me now, it's about your mother." A cold dread washed over me. I excused myself from the conference call, my heart pounding in my chest as I stepped into a small, empty office. "Aunt Susan, is Mom okay? Did something happen?" Her voice was tight, laced with an emotion I couldn't quite place. It wasn't grief, but it was heavy. "She's fine, Catherine. Physically, she's fine. I just got off the phone with her." There was a pause. "I'm calling because I'm worried about her. And frankly, I'm disappointed in you." I was completely blindsided. "Disappointed? What are you talking about?" "Your mother is heartbroken," she said, her voice gaining a sharp, accusatory edge. "She feels so lonely, so abandoned. She told me everything. How you put her in that home and barely ever see her. How Ethan is the only one who makes time for her, driving all that way whenever he can. She said you haven't been to see her in months." The words didn't compute. It was like she was speaking a foreign language. "Months? Aunt Susan, that's insane. I was just there on Sunday. I was there last Friday. I see her multiple times a week. I was there 3 days ago." "Catherine, please don't lie to me," she sighed, and the condescension in her voice felt like a slap. "Margaret was crying. She said you're too busy with your important job and your life to be bothered with your own mother. She said you handle the bills, and she's grateful, of course, but you've outsourced her care and washed your hands of her. Meanwhile, poor Ethan, struggling with his business, is the only one who shows up." I sank into the office chair, the world tilting on its axis. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the nonsensical. Every Sunday afternoon movie, every shared cup of tea, every late-night drive after a long day at work. Did none of it happen? Was I living in an alternate reality? "That is a lie," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and profound hurt. "Aunt Susan, I swear to you, it's a complete lie. I am there constantly. Ethan hasn't visited her in at least 6 months, maybe longer." "Oh, Catherine," she said, her tone dripping with pity. "Your mother explained that too. She said you've always been jealous of Ethan's bond with her. Please, don't try to smear your brother to cover for your own neglect. He sends pictures to the whole family of him with her." Pictures, the selfies from years ago. He was weaponizing them. He was curating a narrative for the rest of the family while I was the one doing the actual work. But why would my mother go along with it? Why would she paint such a cruel, false picture of me? The woman I had sacrificed so much for. "I have to go," I whispered, unable to continue the conversation. The hurt was too immense, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. "Just think about what I said," Aunt Susan said, her voice softening slightly, as if she were granting me grace. "It's never too late to start showing up for her." I hung up the phone without another word. The sterile white walls of the small office felt like they were closing in on me. I stared at my hands, the same hands that had held my mother, that had adjusted her pillows, that had signed every single check for her care for the past 60 months. Abandoned her? The word echoed in the silent room. It was the most painful accusation imaginable, not just because it was untrue, but because it came from her. My own mother. The betrayal was so deep, so absolute, that it felt like it hollowed me out completely, leaving nothing but a raw, aching void where my devotion used to be. For the first time, I didn't see a clear path forward. My project plans and timelines were useless here. I was lost. I drove home from work in a daze. The familiar route felt alien, and the houses I passed every day seemed like props on a movie set. My aunt's words played on a relentless loop in my mind: abandoned, jealous of Ethan, don't lie to me. Each phrase was a fresh stab of pain. I got home, walked past my kitchen, and sat on the couch in the dark, the silence of my empty house amplifying the storm in my head. Why? It was the only question I could form. Why would Mom do this? Was she confused? Dementia was a possibility, but in all my recent visits, she had been lucid. We had detailed conversations about current events, about my work projects, about the lives of her nurses. She remembered the names of my colleagues and asked specific questions. This didn't feel like memory loss. It felt like a deliberate, targeted cruelty. And Ethan, my charming, useless brother. He wasn't just neglecting her. He was actively orchestrating a lie, positioning himself as the hero while I was cast as the villain. The injustice of it all was suffocating. I spent an hour cycling through grief, anger, and utter confusion. I cried on, till my head ached. I felt the urge to call my mother and scream at her, to call Ethan and unleash years of pent-up frustration. But what good would it do? It would be my word against theirs. My aunt's reaction proved that the family had already chosen a side. They had their narrative: Ethan the devoted son, Catherine the cold, career-driven daughter. Any emotional outburst from me would only confirm their bias. They'd see it as me being defensive, proving my guilt. My training as a project manager kicked in, a small, logical part of my brain fighting its way through the emotional fog. A project manager doesn't act on emotion. They act on data. They gather facts, document evidence, and build a case. What was my case? I had my memories, but memories were subjective. I had my financial records, proof that I was paying for everything, but Aunt Susan had already acknowledged that. According to them, I was just writing a check to assuage my guilt. I needed something more. I needed objective, third-party proof. And then it hit me: Oakwood Meadows. When I first enrolled Mom in the facility, they gave me a welcome packet. In it was information about their family portal. It was a secure website where families could see facility announcements, view billing statements, and most importantly, where the front desk staff logged all guest visits. At the time, I thought it was a nice feature but hadn't paid it much mind. I was the only one visiting, so who needed a log? I logged in once to set up my password and never thought about it again. My heart started beating faster. This was it. This wasn't my word against theirs. This was data. Cold, hard, time-stamped data. I scrambled to my office, my hands shaking as I booted up my laptop. I had the login information saved in a folder labeled Mom's Affairs. Finding the website, I typed in my username and password, my breath held tight in my chest. The portal loaded, a generic-looking dashboard with a picture of a smiling senior citizen. On the left-hand menu, I saw the link, Visitor Log. I clicked it. A table appeared on the screen. Date, visitor name, time in, time out. My eyes scanned the page. There it was, my name, Catherine last name, over and over again. August 10th, time in 2:15 p.m. Time out 4:30 p.m. That was last Sunday. August 8th, time in 12:30 p.m. Time out 1:45 p.m. My lunch break on Friday. August 6th, time in 5:45 p.m. Time out 7:00 p.m. After work on Wednesday. Page after page, it was all there. My entire life for the past 5 years, documented in digital ink. The consistency was undeniable. 3, sometimes 4 times a week, every week for 60 consecutive months. I scrolled back, watching the years reverse. 2024, 2023, 2022, it was a relentless, unwavering record of my commitment. I felt a surge of vindication, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. I wasn't crazy. It was real. Then, with a sense of dread and certainty, I used the search filter at the top of the log. Visitor name, Ethan last name. I hit enter. The system processed the request for a moment. Then, the results loaded. The screen was almost completely blank. It showed just one page. I scrolled down. There were only 3 entries, total, for the entire 5 years. One was from the day Mom moved in, 5 years ago. Another was from a Christmas day, 3 years ago. His visit was logged as lasting 40 minutes. The last one was from nearly 2 years ago, on Mom's birthday, a 55-minute visit. That was it, 3 visits in 5 years. I leaned back in my chair, the screen glowing in the dark room. The anger and hurt were still there, but now they were accompanied by something else: clarity. The emotional storm had passed, and in its place was a cold, calm certainty. This was not just a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate campaign of deception by my brother, enabled and amplified by my mother. I took a deep breath. My tears were gone. My grief was transforming into resolve. They had created a fiction to suit their needs. Now I had the facts to destroy it. I clicked the print button, and the printer in the corner of my office whirred to life, spitting out the first of many pages of my evidence. The project had begun. The visitor log was my cornerstone, the undeniable proof of my presence and Ethan's absence. But as a project manager, I knew that a successful presentation required more than just one piece of data. It needed a narrative. I had to understand the why behind the lie. Why would Mom, who I knew was lucid, participate in this, and what was Ethan's endgame? The next few days were a masterclass in quiet investigation, using the skills I'd honed in the corporate world to dissect my own family's treachery. My first step was to analyze communication. I went through years of text messages and emails between myself, Ethan, and my extended family. The pattern was nauseatingly clear. Ethan was a master of perception management. He would pop into the family group chat every few weeks, completely unprompted, with a message like, "Just got off a wonderful call with Mom. She's in such great spirits, sending everyone love." Or he'd post one of his old selfies with her on social media, tagging all our relatives with a caption like, "Family first. So glad I could brighten Mom's day today." He created a constant, low-level hum of feigned devotion. He never specified when he visited, just that he was thinking of her or had just spoken to her. To the casual observer, our aunts, uncles, and cousins, it painted a picture of a doting son. Meanwhile, my communication was practical and direct. I was the one sending out updates on her health after doctor's appointments, coordinating holiday gift lists, and explaining changes in her medication. I was the functional one, the logistician. I wasn't performing for an audience, I was managing a life. My mistake was assuming that the family valued action over performance. I was wrong. Ethan was winning the PR war because I didn't even know I was in it. Next, I needed to understand the financial angle. Ethan's startup had been his go-to excuse for years. I started digging. His company had a flashy website full of corporate jargon and stock photos of smiling millennials in a modern office. But a little more searching revealed the truth. I looked up the company's registration. It was a sole proprietorship registered to his apartment address. There were no employees. A search of tech news sites and startup funding databases showed no mention of his company, no record of any investment rounds. It was a shell, a facade he used to project an image of success and ambition while likely doing freelance work here and there to get by. The most painful part of the investigation was focusing on my mother. Why would she lie for him? I thought back over my recent visits. Had there been signs? I realized that lately our conversations had become more one-sided. She would talk endlessly about Ethan's brilliant business ideas. She'd show me articles on her tablet about young tech millionaires and say, "This will be your brother soon." She was completely invested in his fantasy. His success was, in her mind, her success. It was a more exciting story than her daughter's steady, reliable corporate job. I suspect the lie started small. Perhaps one day, a relative asked Mom when she'd last seen the kids. She, embarrassed that her golden child hadn't visited in months, might have fudged the truth. "Oh, Ethan was just here." Once the lie was told, it had to be maintained. Ethan, realizing he had an easy way out, would have encouraged it. It absolved him of all guilt and responsibility. He could ignore his mother and still be praised for his devotion. It was a perfect, symbiotic deception. My role in this fiction was the necessary counterpoint. For Ethan to be the hero, there had to be a villain. I became the cold, absent daughter, too focused on my career to care. My financial support was twisted into a transactional, heartless act. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during my next visit to Oakwood Meadows. I went at my usual time on a Wednesday evening, armed with a new perspective. I behaved as I always did, warm and attentive, but this time I was listening differently. "Ethan called yesterday," Mom said, her eyes lighting up. "He's so busy with the company, but he always makes time for his mother. He said he might have to fly to San Francisco to meet with investors. "That's wonderful, Mom," I said, my voice even. Later, as I was helping her organize her closet, I casually said, "You know, Mom, I was thinking, it's been a while since we've had a proper family get-together. Maybe for your birthday next month, we could have everyone over. Aunt Susan, the cousins, we could host it in the private dining room here." Her reaction was telling. A flicker of panic crossed her face before she smoothed it over. "Oh, I don't know, dear, that's a lot of fuss. And Ethan is so busy, I wouldn't want to pressure him." She didn't want a family gathering. Of course she didn't, because in a room full of people, the lies could unravel. Questions might be asked that she couldn't answer. Someone might ask me, "So, Catherine, is it true you never visit?" right in front of her. She couldn't risk her carefully constructed narrative being challenged in real time. Her entire world was built around the myth of the devoted son and the neglectful daughter. It was a fiction that made her feel proud and absolved her of the uncomfortable truth. Her favorite child wanted nothing to do with her. My constant, reliable presence was an inconvenient fact, one she chose to simply erase. I left Oakwood Meadows that evening with a heavy, cold stone in my stomach. The investigation was complete. I had the motive, the method, and the evidence. The full scope of their deceit was laid bare. It was deeper and more twisted than I could have ever imagined. The family group C. Hat, once a source of mundane updates and birthday wishes, had become a theater of lies. Ethan had just posted another picture of himself, a solo shot in a polished suit, with the caption, "Long day of meetings, but always making time to call the most important woman in my life. Mom sends her love." The replies flooded in immediately. "You're such a good son, Ethan," from a cousin. "Your mother is so lucky to have you," from an uncle. Aunt Susan replied with a string of heart emojis. It was nauseating. It was also the perfect opportunity. My initial anger had cooled into the focused, methodical calm I felt when launching a major project. The goal was no longer to just clear my name. It was to dismantle the entire false reality they had built, piece by piece, using indisputable evidence. My confrontation couldn't be an emotional outburst on the phone. It had to be a formal, controlled presentation of facts. It had to be unimpeachable. I spent the next week assembling my case file. It felt clinical, detached, but it was the only way I could process the deep personal wound they had inflicted. First, the centerpiece, the visitor log. I didn't just print the raw data. I transformed it into a visual, impossible-to-ignore exhibit. I opened Excel and created a summary chart. On one side, a bar graph showed my visits, month by month, for 5 years. It was a forest of tall, blue bars, showing an average of 15-20 visits per month. On the other side was Ethan's data, a flat, barren line with 3 tiny, almost invisible spikes over the entire 60-month period. Below the chart, I listed the exact dates of his 3 visits and the duration of each. Total time spent with his mother in 5 years, 2 hours and 35 minutes. Next, I tackled the financials. I didn't want to be accused of lording the money over them, but it was a critical part of the story. I created a simple, 1-page financial summary. It showed the total cost of Oakwood Meadows for the past 60 months, a staggering $420,000. Beside it, I listed the total contributions. Catherine, $420,000. Ethan, $0. I also included a screenshot of the email from 5 years ago where he promised to pay me back double, once his startup took off. Then came the communication evidence. I took screenshots of the family group chat. I highlighted Ethan's performative posts about calling or thinking of Mom. Then I cross-referenced them with the visitor log. One of his posts, "So glad I could pop in and see Mom today," was on a day I knew for a fact he was on vacation in Mexico, a fact confirmed by his own social media. I screenshotted his beach photos next to his fraudulent text. It was a direct, provable lie. I compiled a dozen such instances, creating a timeline of his deception. Finally, I needed a way to present this. I knew that if I just emailed it, they could ignore it or frame it as me being aggressive and unhinged. No, this required a captive audience. I used the idea I'd planted with my mother. I sent a message to the entire family group chat. "Hi everyone," I wrote, my tone deliberately cheerful and proactive. "With Mom's birthday coming up, I've gone ahead and booked the private dining room at Oakwood Meadows for a special family lunch to celebrate her. It's all taken care of. It would mean the world to her to have all of us there together. Please RSVP by the end of the week so I can give the facility a final head count. I can't wait to celebrate with all of you." It was the perfect trap. By framing it as a loving gesture for Mom's birthday, no one could reasonably refuse without looking bad. It forced them all into a room together. As expected, the RSVPs came in. "What a wonderful idea, Catherine," Aunt Susan wrote. Even Ethan replied, "Count me in, wouldn't miss it for the world." He had no idea what he was walking into. The day before the lunch, I put the finishing touches on my presentation. I didn't print out copies for everyone like a corporate meeting. That would be too aggressive. Instead, I saved everything into a single, elegantly formatted PDF file on my tablet. It was organized into sections with clear headings: visitation records, financial contributions, communication timeline. It was clean, professional, and devastatingly thorough. I felt a strange sense of calm. The emotional turmoil had been processed and converted into a clear, actionable plan. This wasn't about screaming or crying. It wasn't about begging them to believe me. It was about presenting a body of evidence so complete and so irrefutable that their fantasy world would have no choice but to collapse under its weight. They thought I was a project manager who was too busy for her family. They were about to find out just how methodical a project manager can be when her family is the project. The private dining room at Oakwood Meadows was pleasant, with a long, polished table and a window overlooking the garden. I arrived early, making sure the table was set nicely and coord. Innating with the staff to have lunch served at a specific time. I was calm, my tablet resting in my handbag, my plan rehearsed in my mind. One by one, the family arrived. My Aunt Susan and her husband, 2 cousins with their spouses, and finally Ethan. He strolled in last, wearing a blazer and a confident smile, looking every bit the successful entrepreneur. He gave me a quick, patronizing hug. "Great idea, Kath, really? Good of you to organize this." My mother was brought in by a nurse, and the family fawned over her. She looked radiant, soaking in the attention. She gave me a polite smile and a pat on the hand, then immediately turned to Ethan, her face lighting up. "Oh, Ethan, darling, you made it. I know how incredibly busy you are." He leaned in and kissed her cheek. "Never too busy for you, Mom." We made it through the soup and salad course with strained, small talk. I let them control the conversation, listening to Ethan dominate the floor with vague but impressive-sounding stories about his business. I watched Aunt Susan hang on his every word. I watched my mother look at him with pure adoration. The scene was exactly as I had pictured it, a perfect tableau of their shared delusion. When the main courses were cleared and coffee was being poured, I knew it was time. I stood up, tapping my glass lightly with a spoon. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," I said, my voice steady and clear. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me. "First of all, happy birthday, Mom. We are all so happy to be here to celebrate you." I smiled at her, a genuine but strained expression. "I'm so glad we could all get together. In fact, family is what I wanted to talk about. Over the past few years, it seems there's been a significant misunderstanding about my relationship with Mom, and I believe it's important to clear the air for everyone's sake." Aunt Susan shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Ethan's smile tightened at the edges. "Aunt Susan," I began, turning to her directly, "you called me a few weeks ago, deeply concerned. You told me that Mom felt abandoned by me, that I never visit, and that Ethan was the only one who showed up for her. You said you were disappointed in me. Is that correct?" She flushed, looking from me to my mother. "Well, Catherine, I was just repeating what your mother—" "I'm not blaming you," I said gently, cutting her off before she could retreat. "You were acting on the information you were given, but the information was wrong." I took out my tablet and placed it on the table. This is the official visitor log from Oakwood Meadows, downloaded directly from their family portal. It tracks every single guest who signs in at the front desk. I turned the screen toward them and swiped to the bar graph I had created. This graph shows my visits for the past 5 years. As you can see, I have visited my mother over 1,200 times. A collective gasp went through the room. I let the number hang in the air for a moment. And this, I said, swiping to the next screen, is the log for Ethan. The flat line was stark and damning. In the same 5-year period, Ethan has visited Mom a total of 3 times. The last time was nearly 2 years ago. The silence was deafening. Ethan's face had gone pale, his confident smirk completely gone. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I wasn't finished. I turned to a new page on the tablet. This is a summary of the costs for Mom's care. For 60 months, the total has been $420,000, all of which I have paid, while Ethan, the devoted son, has contributed nothing. Now, Catherine, that's not fair, Ethan finally stammered, finding his voice. My business is. Your business, I interrupted, my voice as sharp as steel, is a lie. I swiped again, showing the screenshot of his business registration as a sole proprietorship. It has no employees and no funding. It's a website you use as an excuse to not contribute financially and an excuse to not show up. I looked directly at him. You've built a fantasy, Ethan. You post old pictures and send misleading texts to the family to make them think you're here, while I'm the one holding Mom's hand, talking to her doctors, and paying every single bill. You've actively lied to everyone in this room. Then I turned my gaze to my mother. This was the hardest part. My voice softened, but the pain was evident. And Mom, you let him, you encouraged it. You told Aunt Susan and the rest of the family that I abandoned you. Why? She stared at her plate, her face crumbling. Tears welled in her eyes. He has so much pressure on him, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't want the family to think badly of him. So you let them think badly of me instead? I asked, the question hanging in the air. The daughter who has never once failed you. The truth, stark and undeniable, had sucked all the air out of the room. Aunt Susan looked at me, her eyes wide. With horror and dawning understanding. My cousins looked from the tablet to Ethan, then to my mother, their expressions a mixture of shock and disgust. The entire foundation of their family narrative had been shattered in the space of 5 minutes. Ethan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I have to go. He couldn't look anyone in the eye. He turned and practically fled from the room, leaving his coat on the back of his chair. No one stopped him. No one said a word. The family meeting was over. The case was closed. The aftermath of the disastrous birthday lunch was not explosive, but a slow, quiet implosion of relationships. Ethan didn't call. He didn't text. He vanished from the family group chat and from all our lives, unable to face the shame of his exposure. His silence was his confession. The myth of the successful, devoted son had been his entire identity within the family, and without it, he had nothing left. I heard months later, through a distant cousin, that he had moved to another state, presumably to build a new fantasy for a new audience. I felt a strange mix of pity and relief. My relationship with my mother was irrevocably broken. I did not stop visiting her, nor did I stop paying for her care. My sense of duty was too ingrained for that, but the nature of my visits changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by a polite, functional distance. We no longer shared easy conversation or knowing glances. Our talks were superficial, limited to the weather and the day's menu. The deep, soul-crushing hurt of her betrayal had created a chasm between us that I could not cross. She had chosen her favorite child's fiction over her faithful child's reality. She had made her bed, and now, in her quiet, lonely room, she was lying in it. She got what she always had, my money and my time. But she had lost my heart, and I think, in her lucid moments, she knew it. It was a quiet, sorrowful kind of justice. The most surprising outcome was my relationship with the rest of the family, particularly Aunt Susan. The day after the lunch, she called me, her voice thick with remorse. "Catherine," she began, I have no words to tell you how sorry I am. I was so quick to believe the worst of you and the best of him. I was wrong. What you have done for your mother for all these years is incredible. I am so sorry for the way I spoke to you and for the way I thought of you." Her apology was genuine, and it was the beginning of a healing I didn't know I needed. In the following weeks, cousins and uncles reached out with similar messages. They were ashamed of their gullibility and in awe of my quiet strength. They saw me for the first time not as the cold, career-driven one, but as the pillar who had been holding the family up all along. The dynamic shifted completely. I was no longer on the periphery. They started including me in a way they never had before. They called just to chat, they invited me for dinners, they asked for my opinion. They respected me. They saw me. When I eventually bought a new car and started planning a real vacation for myself for the first time in years, it was Aunt Susan who was my biggest cheerleader. "You deserve it more than anyone I know," she told me, and for the first time I believed it. I learned a powerful lesson through it all. Family isn't always about the people you're born to, it's about the people who see your truth and honor it. My brother and mother, the two people who should have been my staunchest allies, were the architects of my deepest pain. My extended family, who I had held at arm's length, became my unexpected support system. My definition of family was rewritten. It was no longer a unit defined by obligation and shared blood, but by mutual respect, honesty, and a willingness to see people for who they truly are, not for the story they tell. I still keep the PDF file I created, saved in a secure folder on my computer. I don't look at it, but I know it's there. It's a reminder of the lie, but it's also a monument to my own strength. It represents the moment I stopped silently accepting an unjust narrative and started meticulously, irrefutably, fighting for my own truth. The project was over, the case was closed, and for the first time in a very long time I was free.